I'm Brooke Williams, 30 years old, an elementary school teacher from Colorado. My husband Jack and I have been happily married for 5 years, despite the challenging relationship with his mother Margaret. I never expected that Christmas dinner would turn into a nightmare when she suddenly called me a burden and demanded I leave their home. What happened after I fled into the snowy night changed everything. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey of heartbreak and unexpected healing. Growing up wasn't easy for me. I lost both my parents in a car accident when I was just 8 years old. My grandmother Elaine took me in, raising me in her modest 2-bedroom home in Boulder. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and she taught me that love and kindness were worth more than any material possession. She worked as a librarian and instilled in me a passion for education that eventually led me to become a teacher. I met Jack during my junior year of college. I was working part-time at the campus coffee shop when he became a regular, always ordering the same drink, an Americano with an extra shot. He was studying business administration, and I would often see him hunched over his laptop, completely absorbed in his work. After weeks of casual conversations over the counter, he finally asked me out. Our first date was simple, a walk through the campus botanical gardens followed by dinner at a local diner. I was immediately drawn to his warm laugh and the way he listened so intently when I spoke. Unlike some of the other guys I'd dated, Jack never tried to impress me with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Instead, he showed up consistently, remembered the small details about my life, and made me feel valued. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on a camping trip to the mountains, presenting me with his grandmother's vintage engagement ring under a blanket of stars. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was perfectly us. Meeting Jack's family for the first time was intimidating. The Harrisons lived in a sprawling Tudor-style home in one of Denver's most affluent neighborhoods. Jack's father, Thomas, made his fortune in commercial real estate, while Margaret maintained her status as a prominent figure in Denver's social scene. Their home was immaculate, filled with antiques and artwork that I was terrified of accidentally brushing against. Initially, Margaret seemed welcoming. She embraced me warmly, complimented my simple charm, and insisted I call her by her first name rather than Mrs. Harrison. Thomas was quieter, but kind, offering me a glass of expensive scotch and asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career. Jack's siblings, Paul, the older brother who worked alongside their father, and Amanda, the younger sister, finishing law school, were polite, if somewhat reserved. The first cracks appeared shortly after our engagement. Margaret began making subtle comments about my background and career choice. "Teaching is such a noble profession," she would say with a tight smile. Though I always hoped Jack would marry someone from a similar background. Someone who understands the expectations that come with the Harrison name. After our wedding, a compromise between my desire for something intimate and Margaret's insistence on a society event, things shifted more dramatically. The warm welcome cooled to polite tolerance. Every visit to their home became an exercise in walking on eggshells. Margaret would inspect our apartment when she visited, running her finger along shelves to check for dust and rearranging my furniture without asking. She questioned my cooking, my cleaning, even the way I folded Jack's shirts. "I just want to help you be the kind of wife Jack deserves," she would say when I tried to assert myself. Jack found himself constantly caught in the middle. He loved his family and had been raised to respect his parents' opinions, but he also loved me and could see how his mother's behavior was affecting me. He would try to mediate to explain to his mother that her comments were hurtful, but Margaret was skilled at turning these conversations around, painting herself as the victim of my sensitivity. Thomas, despite his success in business, seemed unable to stand up to his wife in personal matters. He would offer me sympathetic looks across the dinner table when Margaret was being particularly difficult, but never openly contradicted her. This Christmas was already going to be tense. 6 months earlier, I had lost my teaching position due to district-wide budget cuts. Though I'd been applying for new positions relentlessly, the mid-year timing made it difficult to find a replacement job. We were getting by on Jack's salary, but it meant cutting back significantly, especially on gifts. Jack had recently received a promotion that required more travel. While this was excellent for his career, it meant I was spending more time alone with my thoughts, my insecurities about my place in his family, growing in the quiet of our empty apartment. As Christmas approached, I threw myself into making homemade gifts, knitted scarves for Paul and Amanda, a hand-bound photo album for Thomas and for Margaret, a carefully crafted quilt incorporating fabrics that represented significant family memories. I had spent countless hours on these projects, hoping that the personal touch would make up for their lack of monetary value. The week before Christmas, Jack was away on business, returning just in time for us to drive to his parents' home on Christmas Eve. As we pulled into the circular driveway, the mansion glowing with thousands of professional-grade Christmas lights, I clutched the bag of homemade presents and took a deep breath. "It'll be fine," Jack assured me, squeezing my hand. "Just 2 days, and then we can have our own quiet Christmas at home." I nodded, trying to believe him. I had no idea just how wrong he would be. The Harrison family home looked like something from a holiday magazine spread. A 20-foot Christmas tree dominated the foyer, decorated in silver and blue with not a single ornament out of place. Garlands wrapped the grand staircase, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. It was beautiful, but intimidating. Nothing like the cozy, mismatched decorations my grandmother and I put up each year. Margaret greeted us at the door, immaculate in a red cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. "Jack, darling," she exclaimed, embracing her son before turning to me with a cooler smile. "Brooke, I see you're wearing that same coat from last year." Before I could respond, Thomas appeared behind her, giving me a warm hug. "Ignore her, Brooke. You look lovely as always." Inside the house was bustling with extended family. Jack's aunt and uncle, his cousins with their spouses, and several family friends Margaret had invited. I recognized most of them from our wedding, though few had made any effort to stay in touch afterward. Jack's sister Amanda was standing by the fireplace with her new boyfriend, a surgeon named David. She waved us over, her smile genuine if a bit forced. "Thank God you're here," she whispered as she hugged me. "Mom's been driving everyone crazy, making sure everything is perfect." Paul and his wife Stephanie arrived shortly after us, their twin 5-year-old boys immediately racing through the house despite Margaret's obvious disapproval. Stephanie gave me a sympathetic look. As another outsider who had married into the family, she understood my position better than most. After settling into our guest room, it was time for the gift exchange. Everyone gathered in the living room, and I nervously placed my handmade presents under the tree alongside the professionally wrapped boxes. The gift opening proceeded in Margaret's carefully orchestrated order, youngest to oldest. When it came time for Margaret to open my gift, I held my breath. She unwrapped the quilt slowly, her expression unreadable. "How crafty," she finally said, barely glancing at the detailed work I had poured my heart into. "I suppose this is what we can expect when one is on a budget." She folded it carelessly and set it aside, moving on to open Jack's gift, an expensive bracelet that earned effusive thanks and a kiss on the cheek. I felt my face burning, but forced a smile. Jack squeezed my hand, whispering, "She doesn't deserve it." "It's beautiful." Dinner was an elaborate affair. 7 courses served on Margaret's finest china. I had been seated at the opposite end of the table from Jack, between Paul's brother-in-law and one of the family friends I barely knew. Margaret had placed herself next to Jack, monopolizing his attention throughout the meal. The tension built steadily throughout dinner. Margaret made several comments about my unemployment, asking loudly across the table when I thought I might contribute to the household again. She questioned why we hadn't yet bought a larger home or started a family, implying that I was somehow failing as a wife. I maintained my composure, focusing on my food and making polite conversation with my table neighbors. But inside, I was crumbling each barb, cutting deeper than the last. The breaking point came during the dessert course. The dining room was warm, and my hands were shaking slightly as I reached for my wine glass. In a moment of clumsiness, my elbow knocked against the crystal stemware, sending red wine spreading across Margaret's pristine white tablecloth. The room fell silent. I immediately grabbed my napkin, desperately trying to blot the stain, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I can fix this. I know a trick with salt that might help." Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "That's a 300-year-old Irish linen tablecloth, Brooke," she said, her voice ice cold. "But I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been a burden to this family. Jack could have done so much better. Now you've ruined Christmas too. Just get out." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room was on me, expressions ranging from shock to pity to embarrassment. I looked to Jack desperately, hoping he would defend me, say something, anything. But he sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, looking between his mother and me like he couldn't process what was happening. The humiliation was overwhelming. Tears burned in my eyes as I slowly stood up, my legs trembling beneath me. Without a word, I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my coat from the foyer closet, and stepped out into the cold December night. No one followed me. No one called my name. As the heavy front door closed behind me, a sob escaped my throat, the sound swallowed by the falling snow. I had no plan when I left the Harrison house. Blinded by tears and the swirling snow, I just walked my thin dress shoes, quickly becoming soaked in the accumulating inches of powder. The cold bit through my coat, but I barely noticed the chill inside me, far more numbing than the winter air. After about 20 minutes of aimless wandering, I found myself at a bus stop, the overhead light casting a lonely glow on the empty bench. I sat down, finally, allowing the tears to flow freely, my body shaking with sobs. How had this happened? How had a Christmas dinner turned into the complete unraveling of my marriage and my place in Jack's family? Checking my pockets, I found my wallet and phone had thankfully made the journey with me. My phone showed no calls or messages from Jack. Not a single word asking where I was or if I was safe. This realization brought a fresh wave of pain. Even now, he couldn't stand up to his mother for me. As I sat there, memories of our relationship played through my mind, like a montage of a failing marriage. The early days so full of love and promise. The gradual shift after we became part of the Harrison family officially. The increasing frequency with which Jack deferred to his mother's wishes over mine. The arguments that ended with me apologizing even when I'd done nothing wrong just to keep the peace. Had I been fooling myself all along? Was our marriage just a convenient arrangement for Jack, a way to appear settled and responsible while never truly breaking free from his mother's control? A bus pulled up its headlights, cutting through the darkness. The destination displayed on the front read Lakewood, the suburb where my grandmother lived about an hour away. Without hesitation, I stood and boarded, dropping my fare into the box and finding a seat near the back. The bus was nearly empty on Christmas evening, just a few other lonely souls making their way through the holiday. An elderly man sat across from me, his weathered face kind as he offered a gentle nod of acknowledgement. He didn't speak, but there was a quiet compassion in his eyes that told me he understood something of what I was going through. As the bus rolled through the snowy streets, I stared out the window at the passing homes, their windows warm with light families gathered inside celebrating together. The contrast with my situation brought fresh tears. My phone buzzed. A text from Jack. "Where are you? My phone's about to die. Please come back." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened or how his silence had hurt me as deeply as his mother's words. Just a request for my return, as if I had merely stepped out for some air, rather than been publicly humiliated and thrown out of their home. I turned off my phone without responding. The bus journey gave me time to think, to replay every interaction with Margaret over the years. The backhanded compliments, the helpful criticisms, the way she would touch my hair and say, Have you considered a style that frames your face better? Or examine my clothes and ask, is that what teachers are wearing these days? Each comment designed to undermine, to remind me that I wasn't good enough for her son. And Jack, sweet, conflict-averse Jack, who loved me, but couldn't seem to prioritize that love when it meant standing against his mother. How many times had he said, "That's just how she is," or "She doesn't mean anything by it," or "Try to see it from her perspective"? How many times had I swallowed my hurt to make his life easier? By the time the bus reached Lakewood, my tears had dried, replaced by a hollow feeling that was somehow worse. I thanked the driver as I disembarked, then began the 10-minute walk to my grandmother's house, the streetlights guiding my way through the familiar neighborhood. Grandma's house stood out on her street, not because it was large or fancy, but because of the genuine warmth it projected. Christmas lights hung somewhat haphazardly along the gutters. The neighborhood teenagers helped her put them up each year, and a slightly lopsided wreath adorned the front door. Through the front window, I could see her Christmas tree decorated with the same ornaments we'd used throughout my childhood, many of them handmade. I hesitated on the front step, suddenly aware of how I must look. Mascara streaked down my face, hair disheveled, shivering in my insufficient coat. It was nearly 10 o'clock on Christmas night. I hadn't called ahead, but I had nowhere else to go. I knocked softly, then a bit louder when there was no immediate response. After a moment, I heard the shuffle of slippered feet, and then the door opened to reveal my grandmother, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, wearing her favorite flannel pajamas and robe. Her eyes widened at the sight of me. "Brooke, sweetheart, what on earth?" That was all it took. The dam broke again, and I collapsed into her arms, unable to form words through my sobs. She didn't ask questions, just held me tight and guided me inside, closing the door against the cold and the heartbreak of the night. I woke the next morning in my childhood bedroom, sunlight filtering through the faded yellow curtains my grandmother had sewn when I first came to live with her. For a moment, I felt the peaceful disorientation of waking in a familiar place from the distant past. Then the events of Christmas night came flooding back, and the weight returned to my chest. The smell of coffee and cinnamon wafted up from the kitchen. I checked my phone, which I'd plugged in overnight. 17 missed calls from Jack. Numerous text messages ranging from concerned to frantic. I set the phone aside without reading them all. I wasn't ready. After washing my face and borrowing a pair of my grandmother's sweatpants and an old sweater I'd left behind years ago, I made my way downstairs. Grandma was at the stove flipping pancakes. Without turning around, she said, "There she is. Sit down, Brookie. Hot chocolate's ready." She placed a steaming mug in front of me. Hot chocolate made the way she always had, with real melted chocolate and a touch of cinnamon topped with tiny marshmallows. It was what she'd made me the night my parents died, and countless times since when I needed comfort. "You ready to tell me what happened?" she asked, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me before taking the seat opposite. Slowly, haltingly at first, then in a rush, I told her everything. About Margaret's escalating criticism over the years, about Jack's inability to truly stand up for me, about the disastrous Christmas dinner and the wine spill that had been the final straw, about being told I was a burden and being ordered to leave, about Jack's silence in that crucial moment. "And he didn't come after you?" Grandma asked, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. I shook my head. "He texted later, but by then I was already on the bus. No apology, just asking where I was and telling me to come back." Grandma's hands closed around her mug knuckles, whitening. "I've never liked to speak ill of anyone, Brooke, but that woman. And Jack, I raised you to know your worth, and you deserve a partner who defends that worth, especially to his own family." Her indignation on my behalf was both comforting and validating. For so long, I'd questioned whether I was being too sensitive, whether Margaret's behavior was really as bad as it seemed, or if I was simply failing to adapt to the Harrison family culture. "I don't know what to do, Grandma," I admitted, pushing my barely touched pancakes around the plate. "I love Jack, but last night made me realize there's a fundamental problem in our marriage. He won't choose me over his mother. Maybe he can't." "Look at your phone," Grandma suggested. "See what he's been saying since last night. That might tell you something." Reluctantly, I picked up my phone and began scrolling through the messages. 10:45 p.m. "Where are you? Please call me. Oh, my battery's about to die." 11:23 p.m. "I'm worried sick. Please just let me know you're safe." 11:47 p.m. "I'm so sorry, Brooke. What Mom said was inexcusable. I should have said something." 12:15 a.m. "I had it out with Mom after you left. Please call me." 1:04 a.m. "I love you. I'm sorry I failed you. Please give me a chance to make this right." The messages continued through the night, becoming increasingly desperate. The most recent had come just 30 minutes earlier. "I'm going to start calling hospitals if I don't hear from you soon. Please, Brooke." I put the phone down, conflicted. He seemed genuinely sorry and concerned, but was it enough? Was an apology after the fact worth anything when he had sat in silence during the moment I needed him most? "You don't have to decide anything right now," Grandma said, watching my face. "Stay here as long as you need to. Take some time to think." Throughout the day, memories of other incidents with Margaret surfaced. Moments I had dismissed or downplayed at the time, but which now formed a clear pattern of undermining and exclusion. The time she had accidentally left my name off the family Christmas card. The family photos where she had positioned me at the edge, easily cropped out. The dinner parties where she introduced everyone else by name and relationship, but referred to me vaguely as Jack's wife. In the afternoon, over tea in her cozy living room, Grandma shared stories I'd never heard before about her own marriage and in-laws. "Your grandfather's mother was a piece of work," she said with a wry smile. "Thought no woman was good enough for her precious son. First time I made dinner for her, she brought her own salt because she didn't trust my seasoning." "How did you handle it?" I asked. "Not well at first. Tried to please her, twisted myself into knots trying to be what she wanted." Grandma sipped her tea thoughtfully. "But eventually I realized that was a game I couldn't win, so I stopped playing. Started being myself, setting boundaries. Your grandfather had to make some hard choices too, deciding whose feelings mattered more to him." "And he chose you," I said softly. "He did. But it wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "Marriage is worth fighting for, Brooke, but only if both people are fighting together. You can't be the only one in the ring." By evening, I had made a decision. I texted Jack. "I'm at Grandma's house. I'm safe. I need some time to think about everything. Please respect that." His response was immediate. "Thank God you're okay. I understand. Take all the time you need. I love you." I turned off my phone again and helped Grandma prepare a simple dinner. For the first time since leaving the Harrison house, I felt like I could breathe. This modest home with its faded furniture and walls full of family photos was more welcoming than the mansion I'd fled. Here, I had always been enough, just as I was. As we washed dishes side by side, Grandma said, "Whatever you decide about Jack, remember this: you are never a burden. You are a gift. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve your light." I leaned my head against her shoulder, grateful beyond words for her unconditional love and wisdom. In the midst of this painful crisis, I had rediscovered my foundation, and with it, the strength to face whatever came next. I had been at Grandma's house for 2 days, when Jack showed up unannounced. I was in the backyard, helping Grandma take down some Christmas decorations when I heard the front doorbell ring. A few moments later, Grandma appeared at the back door. "Jack's here," she said, her expression neutral. "Do you want to see him?" My heart raced. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I also knew avoiding him wouldn't solve anything. "Yes," I said finally. "But can you stay nearby?" She nodded, squeezing my shoulder as I passed her to go inside. Jack stood in the living room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His normally neat hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "Brooke," he said, his voice breaking on my name. Thank God. We stood there 3 feet apart, the distance between us, feeling both too small and impossibly vast. "You shouldn't have just shown up," I said, crossing my arms. "I told you I needed time." "I know. I'm sorry. He ran a hand through his hair. "I was losing my mind, not seeing you, not knowing if you were really okay. I had to come." The tension in the room was palpable. My grandmother quietly moved into the kitchen, giving us privacy, while staying within earshot. A subtle message to Jack that I wasn't alone. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch while taking the armchair across from it. "Better to have this conversation with some space between us." Jack perched on the edge of the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I don't even know where to start, Brooke. What my mother said to you was unforgivable. And my silence. I have no excuse. I was shocked, and by the time I processed what was happening, you were gone." "That's the problem, Jack," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It wasn't just Christmas night. It's been 5 years of your mother's subtle and not so subtle put-downs. 5 years of you making excuses for her behavior. 5 years of me trying to be good enough for the almighty Harrison family." "I know," he said, hanging his head. "I've been a coward. I've been caught between wanting to keep the peace and needing to stand up for you. And I've failed you every time." I studied his face, looking for any sign that these were just words, that he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear. But the anguish in his expression seemed genuine. "What happened after I left?" I asked. Jack's expression darkened. "All hell broke loose. After you walked out, there was this awful silence. Then Dad stood up and said, 'Margaret, that was absolutely uncalled for.' And Paul, you wouldn't believe it. Paul actually slammed his hand on the table and said he was sick of the way Mom treated you, that it had gone on too long." This surprised me. Paul had always been polite but distant, much like his father. Mom tried to defend herself, saying she was just being honest, that you'd never fit in with the family. That's when I finally found my voice. Jack's hands clenched into fists. "I told her she was wrong, that you were my family, my priority, and if she couldn't respect that, then she was the one who didn't belong in my life." He continued, describing a family argument that apparently had been brewing for years. "It turns out, Mom has been manipulating all of us, playing us against each other. Amanda confessed that Mom had told her you said negative things about her law career, things you never actually said. She did the same with Paul and Stephanie, twisting words, creating conflicts." "Why would she do that?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Dad thinks it's about control. He said—" Jack hesitated. "He said Mom has always been terrified of losing her place at the center of the family. When I married you, it threatened her position. Instead of accepting you, she tried to isolate you." This made a painful sort of sense. Margaret's behavior had never been overtly hostile enough to justify a complete break, but it had consistently undermined my relationship with every member of the Harrison family, including Jack. "The strangest part," Jack continued, "was what happened after Dad called her out. Mom actually broke down, like really broke down. started crying about how her own mother-in-law had treated her terribly, made her feel like an outsider for years. Apparently, she's been carrying that hurt all this time, and somehow she ended up doing the exact same thing to you. I absorbed this information silently, unsure how to feel about it. Margaret's pain didn't excuse her behavior, but it did help explain it. After everyone left, I told Mom that she needed to really think about what she wanted. A son who visited out of obligation a few times a year, or a relationship with our whole family, including you. I said I wouldn't be coming back until she could sincerely apologize and show real change. "And your dad?" I asked. "He's fully on my side. Said he should have stood up to her years ago, that he'd enable her behavior by staying quiet. He actually apologized to me for not being a better example of how a husband should protect his wife." Jack looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past 2 days, Brooke, about the kind of man, the kind of husband I want to be. I've failed you so many times, and I'm so sorry." The sincerity in his voice made my eyes fill with tears. "I don't know if sorry is enough, Jack. I love you, but I can't keep living like this. I can't be with someone who won't stand beside me when it matters most." "I know," he whispered. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I'm asking for a chance to earn it, to show you that I've changed, that I will choose you, every time, without hesitation." At that moment, Grandma re-entered from the kitchen, carrying a tray with coffee and cookies. She set it down and fixed Jack with a stern look. "Young man," she said, "I've been listening and I appreciate your honesty, but my granddaughter deserves more than words. She deserves a partner with a backbone. If you're serious about making things right, you need to understand that marriage isn't just about the easy times. It's about standing firm together when things get hard." Jack nodded, looking both chastised and grateful for her directness. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." "Good," Grandma said. "Now I'm going to visit my neighbor for a bit. You two keep talking." She gave my shoulder a squeeze as she passed her eyes, conveying a silent message. "Stay strong." After she left, Jack and I talked for hours. Really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About our expectations for our marriage. About boundaries with his family. About how we had both contributed to the current situation. Me by too often staying silent about my hurt to keep the peace, him by failing to recognize and address his mother's behavior. By late afternoon, we had reached a tentative resolution. I would return home with Jack, but with clear conditions. We would attend couples counseling. He would maintain the boundaries he had set with his mother. And we would work together to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. "I want our marriage to work, Brooke," Jack said as we prepared to leave. "I love you, and I'm so sorry it took nearly losing you to realize what that really means." I hugged my grandmother tightly before we left, whispering "thank you" in her ear. "Remember," she whispered back, "your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion of you, not even your husband's family." As Jack and I drove back to our apartment, I felt cautiously hopeful. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like we might be walking it truly together. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange limbo. Jack and I were careful with each other, relearning how to communicate honestly after years of avoiding certain topics. We found a couples therapist and scheduled our first appointment for the second week of January. Jack continued working from home instead of returning to the office, as if afraid I might disappear if he left me alone too long. We decided to host a small New Year's Day gathering at our apartment, just Jack's parents initially, a neutral territory for what would inevitably be a difficult conversation. Jack called his father to extend the invitation, explaining that this would be a chance for his mother to apologize and begin rebuilding our relationship if she was willing. Thomas accepted immediately. "She knows she was wrong, Jack," he said. "Whether she can admit it is another matter, but I'll make sure she's there." The morning of January 1st, I was a bundle of nerves as we prepared our modest apartment for visitors. Our home was nothing like the Harrison mansion. a two-bedroom rental with furniture that was mostly secondhand or from budget stores. But it was warm and comfortable, filled with photos and mementos that told the story of our relationship. Maybe we should have gone out for lunch instead. I fretted, rearranging the cushions on the couch for the third time. Neutral territory. Jack took my hands, stilling their nervous movement. This is better. This is our home, our space. Mom needs to see and respect how we actually live, not some sanitized restaurant version. When the doorbell rang at exactly noon, I took a deep breath and steeled myself. Jack squeezed my hand before opening the door. Thomas entered first, giving Jack a bear hug before turning to embrace me warmly. "Brooke, I'm so sorry about Christmas," he said quietly. "There's no excuse for what happened." Margaret followed, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Her usual perfect appearance was slightly muted, her makeup minimal, her clothes elegant but not ostentatious. She carried a small gift bag which she clutched like a shield. "Hello, Brooke," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "Thank you for inviting us into your home." Jack directed everyone to the living room, where I had set out a simple spread of finger foods and drinks. An awkward silence descended as we all took our seats, no one quite sure how to begin. Finally, Margaret cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology, Brooke," she said, her voice slightly stiff. "My behavior at Christmas dinner was inexcusable. I said things that were cruel and untrue, and I'm sorry." The apology sounded rehearsed, and there was a defensiveness in her posture that suggested she was doing this under duress. I could feel Jack tense beside me. I took a deep breath. Now was my chance to speak my truth without anger, but with complete honesty. "Thank you for that, Margaret," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "But Christmas night wasn't an isolated incident. For 5 years, you've made me feel unwelcome in your family. You've criticized my background, my career, my appearance, always with just enough plausible deniability that I questioned whether I was overreacting. It's been death by 1,000 cuts, and it has to stop." Margaret's face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might deny everything, but Thomas placed his hand over hers, giving her a meaningful look. "You're right," she said after a long pause, her voice quieter now. "I've been unkind to you in ways I didn't always acknowledge to myself." "Why?" I asked simply. What did I ever do to deserve that treatment? To my surprise, Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Genuine tears, not the manipulative kind I'd seen her use with Jack before. "It wasn't about you, not really," she admitted. "When Jack brought you home so young and bright and clearly in love, I saw the way he looked at you like you were the center of his world, and I felt replaced." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue Thomas silently handed her. "My own mother-in-law made my early years of marriage miserable. Thomas's mother never thought I was good enough, sophisticated enough. She'd been planning for him to marry the daughter of one of their family friends since he was a child. When he chose me instead, she made sure I knew I was second best." Thomas looked pained. "I didn't protect Margaret the way I should have back then. I thought ignoring my mother's behavior would make it go away. It was the wrong approach, and our marriage suffered for it." "So you decided to become what you hated?" Jack asked his mother, his voice gentle but firm. "To do to Brooke what was done to you." Margaret shook her head, looking genuinely distressed. "I didn't see it that way. I told myself I was helping Brooke fit in, teaching her the family expectations. But deep down, yes, I think I was punishing her for taking my place, for being the woman you turned to first." She looked at me directly. "It was wrong, and it was unfair. You've been nothing but good for Jack, and I've been too selfish to acknowledge that." The room fell silent as we all absorbed this moment of raw honesty. I could see the generational pain being passed down. Thomas's mother to Margaret to me, and potentially onward if we didn't break the cycle. "I can't promise I'll change overnight," Margaret continued reaching for the gift bag beside her. But I want to try. This is a start. She handed me the bag. Inside was the quilt I had made her for Christmas, which I had left behind in my hasty departure. But now, additional squares had been sewn onto it. Beautiful, clearly handmade additions that incorporated fabrics I recognized from Jack's childhood. I spent the last few days working on it. Margaret explained, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. My mother taught me to quilt when I was young before things became difficult between us. I haven't done it in years, but I wanted to add something of myself to your gift, to show that we can create something beautiful together if we try. I ran my fingers over the new squares, touched by the gesture despite my lingering hurt and wariness. It's beautiful work, I said honestly. Thomas and I have also been talking, Margaret added, glancing at her husband. We're going to try family counseling, not just for us and Jack, but for Paul and Amanda too. There are patterns we need to address before they damage more relationships. The conversation continued, sometimes tense, sometimes tearful, but progressively more genuine. There was no magical resolution, no moment where all the hurt of the past 5 years suddenly vanished. But there was something I hadn't expected to find, a fragile beginning of understanding. As we prepared to serve the simple lunch I'd made, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Margaret as she helped carry dishes to the table. Something that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. Your grandmother, she said hesitantly. She raised you after your parents passed. I nodded, measuring coffee grounds for the pot. She did a remarkable job, Margaret said quietly. You have a strength and grace that I've always secretly envied. I hope someday you might share some stories about her with me, about how she taught you to be so resilient. The compliment, perhaps the first genuine one she'd ever given me, caught me off guard. Maybe I will, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. As the 4 of us sat down to eat the meal Jack and I had prepared together, I caught his eye across the table. He gave me a small, hopeful smile, and I realized that what had started as the worst Christmas of my life might, against all odds, be leading us towards something better than what we had before. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Jack and I stood in the backyard of his parents' home watching as Paul's twins chased fireflies across the lawn. The family gathering was to celebrate Thomas and Margaret's 40th wedding anniversary. A casual barbecue that was worlds away from the formal, tense affairs that had characterized Harrison family gatherings in the past. They're getting along better, don't you think? Jack said quietly, nodding toward where my grandmother sat chatting with his mother on the patio. Grandma had become a regular presence at family events, her straightforward nature serving as a gentle check on any backsliding in Margaret's behavior. Better than I ever thought possible, I agreed, sipping my lemonade. The months following our New Year's Day conversation had been a journey of gradual, sometimes painful change. The family therapy sessions were difficult at first, with old hurts and resentments bubbling to the surface. There were setbacks, moments when Margaret fell into old patterns or when I interpreted innocent comments through the lens of past experience. But there was also progress. Jack had found his voice, no longer allowing conflicts to simmer beneath the surface. He had become more consistent in supporting me, drawing clear boundaries with his family when needed. Our own couples therapy had strengthened our communication, helping us rebuild the trust that had been damaged. Thomas had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation. After decades of deferring to Margaret in family matters, he had stepped into a more active role, often mediating conflicts before they could escalate. I've spent too many years being passive, he told us during one family session. It's time I became the husband and father you all deserve. I had returned to teaching in February, securing a position at a private school with a more stable funding situation. The financial pressure that had contributed to our stress before Christmas had eased, allowing us to focus on healing our relationship and establishing healthier family dynamics. Margaret's evolution was slower with occasional relapses into controlling behavior. But there was a genuine effort that I couldn't deny. She had begun asking about my interests, rather than just talking about her own, actually listening to my responses. She made space for my family traditions alongside Harrison ones. Most importantly, she was learning to recognize when her insecurities were driving her actions, often catching herself mid-comment with a self-aware, "There I go again," and a redirection. "Brooke, Jack," Thomas called from the grill. "Food's ready." As we gathered around the patio table, I reflected on how different this felt from the Christmas dinner that had nearly destroyed my marriage. The formal dining room replaced by the casual backyard setting. The tense performative conversation now relaxed and genuine. The subtle power plays gone, replaced by an emerging mutual respect. "Before we eat," Thomas said, raising his glass, "I want to propose a toast to 40 years with my wonderful, complicated, ever-evolving wife." He smiled at Margaret, who rolled her eyes but returned his smile. "And to our growing family, bound together, not by obligation, but by choice. Every day, we choose each other anew." We clinked glasses, and I caught Margaret watching me across the table, her expression thoughtful. After dinner, as Jack helped his father clean the grill, and Grandma chatted with Paul and Stephanie, Margaret approached me with a slightly nervous demeanor. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, gesturing toward the garden path that wound through her prized rose bushes. We walked in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "I wanted to tell you something, Brooke. I've been seeing my own therapist in addition to the family sessions. It's been illuminating." "That's great, Margaret," I said, genuinely pleased by this news. "I've been working through my relationship with my own mother and with Thomas's mother before she passed. The patterns are so clear now looking back." She stopped beside a particularly beautiful pink rose bush. "I don't want to be the mother-in-law my mother-in-law was to me, or the one I've been to you." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I know we still have work to do," she continued, "but I want you to know that I'm trying, and that I'm grateful for your willingness to give our family another chance after Christmas. Jack he's a better man with you by his side." The admission, so at odds with everything she had implied for years, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." "There's something else," she said, her voice softening. "Jack mentioned you've been feeling unwell in the mornings lately. Are you—" The question hung in the air between us. Jack and I had been keeping our news private, waiting until we were past the first trimester to share it with family. "Yes," I admitted, a smile spreading across my face despite my attempt to contain it. 12 weeks now. We were planning to tell everyone next weekend." To my surprise, Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "A grandchild," she whispered. Then, catching herself, she added, "I promise you, Brooke, I will be the most supportive grandmother I can be. I won't interfere or criticize or try to take over. I want to be someone you're comfortable leaving your child with, not someone you dread involving." The sincerity in her voice touched me deeply. "I believe you," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. "And I want you to be part of our child's life, a positive part." We rejoined the others, our secret still between us for now. As the evening wore on, I found myself watching Jack interact with his family. The easy rapport with his father, the playful banter with his siblings, the gentle respect he now showed his mother. He had grown too, becoming more confident in navigating family dynamics while staying true to our partnership. Later that night, as we prepared for bed in our recently purchased small home, a modest upgrade from our apartment, but still well within our means, Jack noticed my thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside me on our bed. "I was just thinking about last Christmas," I admitted. How I never could have imagined that such a painful moment would lead to all this growth. Jack took my hand, placing it gently over the barely perceptible curve of my stomach. Sometimes you need to hit bottom before you can rebuild. My mom calling you a burden and telling you to get out was the worst thing she ever did, but it forced us all to confront issues we'd been avoiding for years. It's strange, I mused. In some ways, I'm actually grateful it happened. Not for the hurt, but for the wake-up call it gave us all. Me too, Jack said, pulling me close, though I still wish I'd found my voice sooner that night. I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the baby flutter within me. Too early for Jack to feel yet, but a constant reminder of the future we were building. You found it eventually. That's what matters. As we drifted off to sleep, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The broken family dynamics that had seemed irreparable on that snowy Christmas night were slowly healing. The marriage that had teetered on the brink of collapse was now stronger than ever, fortified by honest communication and mutual respect. And the woman who had once been told she was a burden had found her rightful place, not as an outsider desperately seeking approval, but as an equal partner in creating a new family legacy. Thank you for watching my story today. If you've ever had to deal with difficult in-laws or family conflict, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. How did you handle it? Did you find healing, like I eventually did? Remember to hit like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family relationships can heal even after the deepest hurts. Wishing you all the strength to stand up for yourselves and the wisdom to build bridges when possible. Until next time, remember your worth is never determined by someone else's opinion of you.